Hi guys, this is Roy, 3D artist from Yggdrasil Group, and today I'd like to show you guys how we can transfer a texture from a model with one UV to the same model with different UV. In this case, it is applied to the situation when you would like to make some modifications to the UVs, but you would like the textures to remain the same, or if you want to add a different model that has different UV into the same existing UV and you don't have space, right? So let's say for this example, I have this antler right here that has its own UV texture set, and I would like to transfer this texture that has the antler right into the same texture file that has the, in this case, the deer's body, right? So I want to combine all of these textures into one single texture. How do we do that? First of all, this is the new deer that I created, right? So I went ahead, what I did was I went ahead and made some few tweaks to the existing model to make ways for the antler right before I combine them into one. You guys can probably see that there are changes made. All of this is just to make way for this. We're combining the antler into the same UV with the body. After that, let's go through Substance Designer, a very powerful tool. Most people know this as that one material creating tool, right? This program, mind you, is not only for creating materials. It can be used to bake. It can also be used to transfer textures from one object to other. It can also be used to make non-destructive changes to whatever textures we have, and we can stack and do any crazy changes without having to resolve to Photoshop. So the rule of transferring texture, right? In this case, the models are exactly the same, right? This model and this model, the only changes made were the UVs and the materials assigned to them. For this one, we have two materials, that being the antler and the body. This one, we are making changes to that. We want to combine those into one single material and texture. So what do? The rule of thumb of transferring the textures in this case is, since the model is the same, we want to maintain the position of them to be the same, right? No overlapping, maintain the same position, right? There must be as minimal changes to position as we can, right? And then we are going to export this new file that we want to be the new UV, and we are going to want to export this file after making it the same position as the old one, and we want to name this deer_new UV. This is just for my for the simplicity's sake, for me to understand, because this is the deer with the new UV that we want. And we also want to export the old one with the old UV information, and we will name this deer_old UV. Again, make sure they stay at the same position. Alright, now that we have everything ready, that being the textures that we want to be transferred, and the two models, the old model with the old UV information associated with these textures, and the new model that we made a few changes, and we want these textures to be projected into the new UVs that were made, right? We are going to open Substance Designer, right? So we are going to create a new scene, right? You can just go ahead and click New Substance. Leave it as it is, it's fine, right? Maybe name it, I'm gonna name it Deer Transfer for this case. Leave it as it is, it's fine, right? Unless you want some specific specifications. It should be good as it is. Then, all right, let's start it. This is just a basic output and input nodes. just leave it as it is. We will make our changes later as we progress, right? First thing you want to do is you want to import these models, the new, the old UVs. And how you're going to do that is you are going to drag this in unsaved package. That's what it's named right now. Yours could be named differently because it's unsaved. So just drag it here, and it's going to ask you that the model has multiple UDIMs. Is this okay? This model does not have any UDIMs information. I don't know why it always asks this, but just ignore this and it's always say yes. All right, and the same goes to the new one. Boom. Now we have two models. This program is a phenomenal tool. Most people know it as that one program that's used to make materials. It is actually more powerful than that. This program can be used to bake textures, edit those baked textures with non-destructive, no-spaced editing, meaning you can do all the crazy tweaks in here without changing the original textures, right? Which makes it superior to Photoshop in texture editing ways. And it can also be used to bake. It can also be used to transfer textures, which is what we are going to delve into now, right? Since we are transferring textures, right, we also want the textures associated with the old model that we have. So I am going to just highlight all of these textures I need, and same thing, drag and drop, and I'm going to click link resources. What this does is it's going to link the path to these locations and browse these files according to the path. This is non-destructive editing. It is different from the other option, which is import resources. This will kind of duplicate these files into the program, making it heavier and such. For this case, let's just do link resources and click OK. Here we go. We have all the files. We have the normals, the you don't need alpha for this. The diffuse and everything. In your case, you might have more maps, but the process is exactly the same, right? Down below, this is a preview. Down below here, this is a preview panel, right? We have the model preview panel, and we also have the texture preview panel, right? If I double click at a model, it will display it on this panel, right? So you guys can see the changes live. If any textures are applied to it, is a very nifty feature. You also have the old model. It's the exact same model with different textures, right? So how do we bake textures? We go ahead and click at the new model with the new UVs that we want the textures to be transferred into. So we double click, bake model information. This is the menu that's going to pop out. You can see that there are UVs, the new UVs that we made some adjustments to, right? What you want to do is you are going to go to this panel right here. It says set up high definition mesh. You are going to want to select from resources, meaning it's going to select anything that is in this panel, right, in its workspace. Going to from resource, old UV, because treat this as like a high poly baked into a new low poly, right? To select the old one, because we want the information from the old texture, from the old model. Adjust it to the preferred resolution. The format, I typically go for TGA. At Yggdrasil Group, we do TGA. Anti-aliasing, we prefer 2x2. this, and the UV, preferably when you work with game, it's supposed to be only one UV set, right? Dilation width, we tend to use this as 6 to add some paddings. Apply diffusion, this will project, you know, extra paddings and leave no space, and it will leave no space on this, on the baked texture. We want to tick that off, check that off. For this frontal value, we set to 0.02, and the same thing with the rear value, 0.02. all right, then the next thing is we want to select what baker we want, right? This is the model, this is the panel that you generally use to bake textures, right? Here you can see the typical substance, this substance painter mesh maps, like baking AO, curvatures, word space, normal, so on. But in this case, we wanna click this particular baker, which is transferred texture from mesh. Rename that. I'm going to rename my first one for diffuse as Deer Diffuse. Second one being Deer Normal. Alright, in my case there are only diffuse and normal, right, that we want to transfer. So the next thing we want to do is we want to browse these textures, right? Because what are we going to bake or transfer from if we do not select which textures we want, right? So we are going to browse from resource again, and we are going to select accordingly. This is diffuse, so I'm going to select diffuse. This is normal, so I'm going to select normal. So I am going to select normal. And make sure that everything is correct, right? Make sure it's DirectX if you're working with video games. And for normal map, there is this channel box that says normal map, so make sure to click that. Right, and let's see how it goes. What it does is it will what this is going to do when I start rendering, right? So let's go ahead and start rendering. There we go. All the textures are being transferred from this original mesh with the old textures into the new model, which is this, into the new model with the new UVs, which is this, using these textures, right? That is how it worked. And now we have, under that new UV there, we have these two. Voila! You can see the changes being made, right? And it is a success. You can see that, you know, the limbs were being moved into the new UV islands. It is a success. But we still have one more step left. You can see the antler area is still very janky. It doesn't have the antler textures to it. That is because we haven't dealt with this textures. So I am going to do that again. I am going to go to Deer New UV. I'm going to bake it again. I am going to create 2 extra transferred texture from mesh. Uncheck the previous one that we made, the Deer Diffuse and the Deer Normal, because we already did that. We are going to make another one called Antler Diffuse. Antler Normal. There we go. So we are going to leave everything as is except for the texture. Let's change that. Let's browse this to the antler files instead. Antler normal. There we go. Apologies for the confusing name. And as always, if it's a normal map, check normal map. Start render. Boom. Will you look at that? Everything else is messed up except for the antler. That is because we are transferring the antler texture alone. Alright, so right now this is the fun part. This is the fun and confusing part, right? We are at the stage that we edit the texture, kind of like Photoshop. We are going to want to Photoshop this antler into this texture with the remaining deer pieces. So what we are going to do is we are going to essentially Photoshop this antler onto this. And what we want to do is we want to hit tab and it will bring you to the node menu. What we want is the blend node. If you guys are familiar with node-based editing, this process will be very natural to you. So we are going to want, so this node will have foreground, background, and opacity. Generally, if you have meshes with transparency, you do not want the opacity. Opacity is like a mask layer that is going to determine which area you are going to apply alpha to foreground. For this, I am going to use the antler layer as a foreground, right? And I am going to use the deer body as background. Double click, it's still the same. That is because we need a mask to tell the program that we only want the antler from the foreground. How do we do that? And we do that by creating a node called SVG. And this is going to be a graphical node. I want to plug the antler in, right? How this program works is if you double click something, it will display that texture or whatever node it is in the display panel. But if you click once, it will display the attribute and tweakable parameters of that. So what I want to do is I want to create mask on the SVG node. SVG allows you to create masks and paint masks. But I want to preview this, but I am going to want to use this. I would like to work on SVG while previewing the antler texture. How are we going to do that? So how are we going to do that? We do that by double clicking at the antler texture and a single click at SVG. This will display the texture for you while working in SVG, right? And this is when I am going to paint white mask on the antler only. But just for simplicity's sake, I'm not going to be so meticulous about it. Here we go. If you check the SVG out, you can see that it is highlighted white in the antler area while leaving the rest black. And we are going to use that as a mask. You can see that it's still not working. This is a very common issue with Substance Designer is in the way that it only registers a black and white image as mask, but this SVG, it defaults to color, right? It has RGB information. We are going to want to, in the right panel right here, we want to change it from color to grayscale. Look what happens. It's no longer dotted, which means it is working. Voila! Now we have combined the two together. And I'm just gonna go ahead and save this texture. I'm going to create new texture folder, and I'm gonna say deer diffuse. Same thing with normal maps. We are going to create a blend, plug the antler into foreground, the deer body into the background, and we are going to use the same mask, plug it into opacity, and boom, we have the combined output. And let's save this as deer normal. Alright, and we are going to test it out whether that transfer works or not. Let's go to let's go browse those textures, why don't we? This is the diffuse, normals, change it to raw. There we are. There we go. A successful transfer, right? So I hope that helps, guys. If there are any questions, feel free to let me know. And I will see you guys next time. Good luck transferring texture.